Hi, this is Karen White of Divine Time Astrology, and I have with me Neeshee.Pandit of atmaastrology.com again. And today we're talking about the sign of Gemini. And the sun goes into the sign of Gemini on May 22nd this year and ends on June 22nd. And typically the sun goes into the signs around the same exact day or one day before, one day after every single year. So this information is always relevant. So next year you can go and listen to it again. And it's stuff that you probably haven't heard before about the signs. It's from the Vedic point of view. So you'll hear some things you've never heard before, and Neeshee and I will do our best to explain it in a way that makes sense. But you'll see, you'll have some ahas when you listen to it. So hi, Neeshee. Thanks for being here again with me.
Hi, Karen. It's great to be here again. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So the sign of Gemini. So we're going to talk about the usual aspects of the signs. In the Vedic side of astrology, the Vedic point of view, I should say, Gemini they're not twins. They're a pair. One is male and one is female. And that's the difference between Vedic astrology and Western astrology. In Western astrology, it's the twins. Pollux, Pollux, I believe it's spelled, based on that mythology, the Western mythology. But in Vedic astrology, it's a male and a female. And the male is holding a club, and the female is holding a lute. So would you like to talk about that a little bit, Neeshee, what that means? Because it's very interesting.
Well, there's a lot of symbols to consider, but I just take the primary archetype of the pair as like a depiction of duality, a depiction of Shiva Shakti, the male and the female principles of manifestation being in play. I feel like that's what Gemini is really trying to express with that imagery, is like the two aspects of conditional nature coming together. So union, tantra, the male and the female.
What's interesting about that too is that I was thinking that sometimes it seems like humans don't quite belong here on this planet because our nature is such that we're very curious and we're always learning and more, and technology is always advancing more and more. And yet we keep finding out that just about everything that we do has a destructive element to it. It either is destroying something on the planet or we're destroying ourselves in some way. Yet it's our nature to continue to be curious and to explore and to make more technology and advance in all forms of knowledge. So I think that that's what the man holding the club represents in Gemini. But then the lute is expressing that, the curiosity, our ability to make tools and then to really take those tools to the farthest extent that we possibly can. It's like we're always going further and further and further, and everything is accelerating. And I think that's what Gemini is about as well. So like you said, that dual side, on one hand, it's really great because Gemini rules the hands, the arms, the shoulders, which is our ability to make tools.
Right.
And, it's basically what separates us in many ways from most animals, though crows make tools too.
Right. Our ability to be resourceful.
Yeah. So, Gemini also rules the neck and the 7 cervical vertebra. And it's based on a person standing with arms out to the sides, horizontal to the ground, and the neck and arms falling in the same section. So, the neck allows us to turn our heads in order to see the different options instead of which is only right in front of us. So it's that versatility again. It's the dual sign of Gemini.
And it's, you know, it's a Mercury ruled sign. So Gemini is, of course, using that discernment, you know, to decide what is the best thing. You know, that's always a quality of Mercury. And so Gemini, like you were just saying, you know, is able to look at all of the different possibilities, you know, make a discernment.
Right. And of course, the curiosity of Mercury comes
Right.
through really clearly in Gemini.
That's right.
Every Gemini I know is very, and I seem to know a lot of Geminis. They're Gemini sun people. They tend to be very intelligent, general.
Mm-hmm. Experimental.
Experimental. That's what Gemini likes to do. He has to experiment.
Yep.
It's his nature. So I think that's probably where the mad scientist archetype comes from. It's from Gemini. In fact, I have a little story about that. I'm very particular about my food. I'm kind of what you would call a foodie. Okay. So if my husband makes a meal, I'm kind of anticipating what I'm going to be eating, what it's going to taste like, what it's going to be like. However, sometimes what he does is he's Gemini sun. So I'll get my eggs, for instance, and I'm eating it, and then I taste something sweet. And I said, "What did you do to my eggs?" He added maple syrup to them one time. And I was like, "Why did you do that? What made you think that that would taste good?" And he goes, "I don't know. I was just experimenting."
Yeah,
said,
exactly.
"Great. Please don't experiment with my food. Okay? Don't do that to me. Because I'm anticipating it to taste a certain way." And another time he made chili, and it had this weird taste. And I said, "What did you put in it this time?" He said, "Oh, I put sage in it." I said, "Sage? Why would you put sage in chili?" He said, "I don't know. It's just experimenting." So if you are married to a Gemini, don't let them touch your food unless you're open to experiencing some pretty strange combinations of things.
That's right. Trial and error is the name of the game.
Right. So anyway, I thought that was a really good example of Gemini. The next quality is there's movable, fixed, and dual. And Gemini is one of the 4 dual signs: Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces.
Mm-hmm.
And the dual signs are very skilled, especially the Mercury rules dual signs, because it's Mercury. He's the manifestor planet. So you want to say something about that too?
Sure. I mean, Mercury's our ability, you know, and so that's why the Mercury ruled signs are particularly strong in this capacity. The dual signs are here to improve upon things. You know, they're here to take one thing and make it better, to add their skills to it, you know, because they have such capabilities. They can see, you know, because they can see all the different options, like we said about Gemini, they can see how this could be better than it currently is. And they're willing to experiment to find out how to get there, you know? So dual signs are very much in a state of consciousness in relationship to life that's about going to the next step, rather than they're not here just to nourish the thing as it is. They're here to take it to the next level.
Yes. Gemini in particular improves on the available resources. Mm-hmm. Now, the interesting thing too about the dual signs is how it fits into the seasons. The cardinal or movable signs begin a season, then the fixed sign maintains the season, mm-hmm. and then the dual sign starts changing it and getting ready for, starts dissolving it and changing and getting ready for the next movable sign. So that's another quality of being multi-skilled, multi-talented. It's another way that you can see how that works in nature. Gemini is a masculine sign and therefore considered to be cruel. So you want to talk about that, because that's a really interesting concept and people need to understand what that means exactly. It's not as bad as it sounds.
Yeah, cruel meaning, the masculine and feminine forces are the forces of demand versus nourishment, Like when a child is born, it's completely dependent on the mother, and it's not ready yet to take the demands of the father for discipline, for growth, for the hard things. It just needs to be nourished and sustained. On the basis of being sustained and nourished, the child can receive these so-called cruel influences of the father that allow the child to grow, into an adult being, which comes with like rules, restrictions, understanding limitations, like being disciplined, all of those qualities, now that you're nourished to be mature, you need some of that cruelty, so to speak. So it's a word to indicate that. So yeah, the masculine signs are cruel in that regard, because they represent a masculine force. They don't represent a force that's trying to nourish you. They represent a force that's trying to help you grow to the next level. And so there's some friction there, but Gemini is about utilizing that, capitalizing on that friction to make something better. It's a masculine energy altogether. It's here to exert itself, into the world. So those two things go together.
Yes, and it's about focusing on getting things done. So it has to be harder and pushier. And so they're not focused on the niceties of life. That's what the feminine is for. The reward for doing all that hard work. And Gemini in particular is focused on its interests and won't pay much attention to people and things that are not part of their interests. Mm-hmm. So that can seem cruel too. But there's, of course, a good reason for that. And everybody has Gemini somewhere in their birth chart where they may or may not have a planet in there, but there will likely be planets aspecting that house. So we all have that in us to some extent or another.
Another way of saying it is that cruel signs like require something of you, whereas the gentle signs are more about just being what you already are, And those two things are always in play, in people's lives, and it's about being sensitive to that. So Gemini is definitely about coming up to something.
Yes, true. And now, so for the Pitta, the Kapha, and the Vata, this is always the fun part for me too, when you get to talk about the Ayurveda. And because it is a air sign, that makes it Vata.
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So the elements in the doshas are, of course, completely connected. Doshas are made of elements and so forth. So if you have an air sign, it's going to be Vata. And that's the mobile quality of Gemini. It's a light and airy sign in the sense of being creative, being intellectual, having ideas, being able to connect. It's air that allows for exchange to happen between things. You don't have air, two things can't exchange. So Gemini is about connection and exchange of things, being a Mercury ruled sign. And so that's where that air element comes in. It's not the Mercury ruled sign that's earth element. That would be Virgo. This is the air. Right. So it's much lighter. It's much more mobile is really a good word for it, Well,
yeah. And it also provides Gemini in particular with the intelligence and skill with which to direct change. Because it's change is going from the fixed sign of Taurus to the movable sign of Cancer.
Right.
So there's that.
There's a logic even to the pattern of the zodiac, as you look at those qualities. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's totally tied into nature.
Exactly. It's an observation of the cycles of nature, basically.
So now here's the description of Gemini. The old language from Brihaparashara, the Rasi or the sign characteristics, it says, front rising, a pair of humans with mace and lute. I guess mace is another word for club. Western, airy, two-footed, night strong, village roaming. Vata, normal limbed and grass colored, is the pair ruled by Mercury. So that's the description. And so we're going to be talking about what front rising means. Okay. Signs are considered to rise over the eastern horizon with either their fronts first or their backs first. And then with the exception of Gemini, all the night strong signs rise with their backs. And what this means, but Gemini is a day strong sign, and except for Pisces, rise with their fronts first. Now, this is something I'm sure you've never heard before. And when talking about the signs, this is very unique to Vedic astrology. And so front rising has to do with, and that means they have an easy time bringing their tasks to concrete realization. And Mercury is the planet of concrete realization. So, and he rules over Gemini.